Today on Brotherhood of Torque, we are going to talk about improving fuel economy. It is March of 2022, and in case you haven't noticed, fuel prices are through the roof. Now, I'm not going to go into why I think they're through the roof or anything like that. I'm just going to go into ways that can help you save yourself some money while you have to drive around. So this is my kind of little beat up off-road project. It's a 98 Mercury Mountaineer, which is essentially an Explorer. So a lot of the things you'll see on this vehicle aren't what you'll see on like a super, ultra modern car. This is pretty old technology, but the same principles still apply. So I'm going to go over some real easy stuff that, you can do to help your fuel economy, things you can take into a mechanic or like a lube shop and have done. And they're legitimate ways that will help your engine and your vehicle be more efficient. So we're going to start with, first thing is tires. Now, these are big off-road tires, which are not the best for fuel economy. Well, no matter what kind of tire you have, you want to make sure that you have the proper amount of air pressure in them. Because even though the tire looks like it's straight up and down right now, you can see on the bottom there's a little bit of a bulge. Now, bear with me, I'm not an artist by any means, but this is kind of what'll happen if you let your tire get flat or not have the proper air pressure. This is a properly inflated tire where you can see that it's pretty rounded on the bottom and you have the proper amount of contact with the ground. Now, this is kind of what a tire that's underinflated will look like. Now, you'll see this bulge on the bottom. Now, that will increase your traction, which if you're like off-roading or going mudding is good, but the extra amount of tire on the ground will create more friction, which in turn makes your vehicle have to work a little bit harder. And I know it sounds stupid, but having the tires properly inflated makes a noticeable difference. And most people don't know that. So what you do, every tire is different. So what you'll come over and look, and you'll see this number right here where it says max load is how much weight the tire can carry. But then you'll see at a number right here, 50 PSI cold. So if your tires were a little warmer, that number would be different, but you can do this at the gas station. You can get a little air compressor. You can get a tire pressure checker from, the auto parts store, or you could go to a tire place and they'll usually check them for you for free. But having the proper amount of tire pressure is huge. So it's a really super easy thing you can check, and you want to make sure that all four are equal. So that's, like I said, tires are a big deal. So go out and check your tires, see where they're at. I mean, you'd be surprised, even though the tires hold air and it doesn't look like they leak, air can and will escape over time. So that's a huge thing, money saver that you can, do and get that done. Now, the second thing you can do is check your air filter. Now, like I said, every vehicle is going to be different. This one's actually pretty easily accessible. So the air filter's purpose is to remove debris from the airstream going into the engine. Just like you wouldn't want to inhale a bunch of dust and rocks and dirt and stuff, neither does your engine. So this is the way that the air goes into your engine, and under here is the air filter. Now, this one, like I said, is pretty easy to open. And just pull that back, and there's your air filter. Now, it looks nice and red on the bottom. Now, they'll have different colors. They have blue and white and all the different colors. Now, it looks pretty nice here, yeah. Well, on the other side, it's actually fairly dirty. So these, you can get these between 20, 30 bucks at the auto parts store. And a lot of time they'll even help you replace it in the parking lot or whatnot. Or you can take it to like a quick lube place and they'll do it for you. But if your air filter is plugged, your engine has to work a lot harder to breathe air in, because an engine is basically just a giant air pump. It's basically breathing in air from the intake side and then expelling it through the exhaust. So if this is restricted, it would be kind of like you trying to breathe through a drinking straw. And as you can imagine, that's not the most efficient way to, inhale and exhale. And same goes for your engine. So you go ahead and put this back. Like I said, on this vehicle, it's quite easy to do. It's not bad at all. So lock that back down. Next up is the ignition system. Now, if you have a gasoline-powered vehicle, which the majority of vehicles on the road are, you will have a system on your vehicle called the ignition system, which creates the spark to burn the fuel inside the cylinder. So like I said, this is an older vehicle, but it's kind of nice because everything's out in the open. So these are what are called ignition coils. Now, when each cylinder needs a spark created to fire the fuel that's in there, the engine will send a signal to this coil, this ignition coil, and it will create a spark and send it down one of these wires to get to the spark plug to light the fuel off. Now, most of the time the ignition coils either work or they don't, but as they age, as electrical components age, the what's called resistance inside them can increase. So basically resistance is an increase in resistance to electrical flow. So as resistance goes up, it's harder for the spark or current to flow through what it's flowing through. So over time, the resistance inside these coils can go up, or they can get a crack in them and get moisture and everything, so they don't fire as efficiently as they used to. It's always a good idea to kind of keep an eye on them. Like these ones are dirty, but when I tuned this up last time, I made sure it was okay. You want to make sure your ignition coils are in good shape. And then this is a spark plug wire. Now, most newer vehicles don't have spark plug wires. They have what is called a coil on plug, where there's an ignition coil sitting right over the spark plug. So instead of having two like this vehicle does, you'll have, if this was a newer V8, it would have 8 coils, 1 per cylinder. So you don't typically see spark plug wires anymore, but for the purpose of this video, I'm going to cover it now. This is one that has been removed. And basically all it does is it takes the spark from this side and transfers it out to this side so it can go into the spark plug. Now, same thing like I was talking about resistance. As these wear down over time and age, the resistance in them goes up. Like you can see, this one has been damaged. I think a rodent bit this one, but as these age, you won't have as strong of a spark coming out the end, so the engine won't be able to run as efficiently. So you can, auto parts stores or dealership or whoever will carry these, or if you just want to have your vehicle serviced, you can take it in and they will do them if you have them. Now, the newer vehicles with coil on plug, some of them still have a little spark plug wire. They'll be about 8 inches long, and then some don't have it at all. But part of tuning up a newer vehicle is making sure that the boot is in great shape too, because if you have cracks in the boot, or if it's all kind of gross and oil soaked or something, the spark can actually leak out the side and you'll lose efficiency. So you have your spark plug wire. Now, this is a spark plug. Now, this one's new. I pulled it out of my toolbox. And basically, you see it looks like it's in good shape. Now, this little area right here is called the gap, and different vehicles need a certain spark plug gap. It's a specification, and it will vary from vehicle to vehicle. Well, as the spark plugs age, this little center part right here called the electrode will wear down. So it'll actually start retreating into the spark plug, which will make the gap bigger. And once the gap gets bigger, the spark isn't as efficient, so the engine will not run as well. So as inexpensive as spark plugs are, it's a good idea to have them changed if you don't know the last time they've been done. So this is the spark plug wire, and the ignition coil are all part of the ignition system. And having a properly operating ignition system is huge to the efficiency of your vehicle. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is fuel injectors. Now, on this vehicle, they're down in there. You can't really see them, but on all fuel injected vehicles, fuel injector cleanliness is a huge deal. Now, over time, no matter how good a fuel you put in there, the different brands have different, things that they say works to help keep your engine running better and whatnot, but having clean fuel injectors is a huge deal. So if you haven't run an injector cleaner or something in a while, go to the auto parts store, get some injector cleaner, pour it in your fuel tank right before you get gas, and then pump your gas, because the gas going into the tank will help mix it up and make sure it's properly dispersed. So, once a year, I'll run fuel injector cleaner just to keep mine at tip-top shape. So yeah, clean injectors is paramount to a properly running engine. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is oxygen sensors. Now, most people who aren't, car people don't even know what these are. Now, what this is it's a sensor. It's called an oxygen sensor or an O2 sensor, and this thing lives in the exhaust. Now, newer modern vehicles will pretty much anything made after, the mid 80s will have oxygen sensors. Now, what an oxygen sensor's job is it lives in the exhaust and it reports back to the engine to tell it how efficiently the engine is burning the fuel. So this thing looks for essentially how much oxygen and how much unburned fuel is in your exhaust. Now, if the oxygen sensor says, hey, there's a lot of unburned fuel in the exhaust, then it tells the computer, hey, there's too much fuel. So the computer will do what's called lean it out. It will reduce the amount of fuel that the computer is injecting into the engine, which will make it burn cleaner and more efficiently. And vice versa. If this thing sees a condition where it says, hey, I'm lean, which means there's not enough fuel, then it'll tell the computer, hey, I need more to keep the engine running properly. Now, these O2 sensors, it's constantly giving information to the engine. Well, these little slots in it are how the exhaust gas gets in there to the sensor, which is underneath this little protector. Well, over time, as these sensors age, these little slots will get plugged up with carbon, and the sensor will just fatigue and wear out. And what will happen is, instead of telling the computer, hey, I'm running rich, go ahead and make your adjustment, what it'll do is it can get lazy and it'll just say, it'll see that it's running rich, but it won't immediately report it. So the engine will continue to run inefficiently for a longer period of time. And no matter what brand you have, these things do get lazy. Rule of thumb is I change these about every, say about 100,000 for the newer ones. Now, you don't have to wait for a check engine light to go on in order to replace these. Now, it will turn your check engine light on if these get really, really bad. Basically, if the computer says like, hey, this thing is not doing its job at all, or it completely died and it sees that it's missing, the computer will pop your light on and say, hey, there's a problem here. But the computers have a lot of wiggle room in there for these things as far as how good they work. So you can have one that's super lazy and not working efficiently, but the computer will say, it's still working okay, I'm not going to pop the light on. So oxygen sensors play a huge part in how efficiently your engine runs. Now, this is a V8, so there's two sides of the engine, 4 cylinders here and 4 cylinders here. So the V8 has 2 of these. It'll have one on each side, and then you have your catalytic converter, and then there's some downstream of the catalytic converter which tell the computer how well your catalytic converter is working. So yeah, oxygen sensors, big deal. They're typically an overlooked maintenance item, but these can have a huge impact on how well the engine runs. Now, because I was talking about check engine lights, we're gonna go ahead and discuss the effect it can have on your engine. Now, the check engine light will come on when there's something wrong with your vehicle. Now, if like I said, if a sensor is kind of getting lazy, or if there's a spark plug that's wearing out a little bit but it still works okay, the check engine light usually won't come on. So when you see the check engine light, it's usually something that needs to be addressed pretty quickly. Now, if you say you have a loose gas cap or you forget to put it on, it can turn the check engine light on. That's not as serious of a problem as if a spark plug's failing or if another sensor's failing. But what happens is, when your check engine light comes on, when the computer detects a condition that warrants turning the check engine light on, the computer goes into a different mode. So what it'll do is it'll start ignoring a lot of the sensors. It'll ignore the O2 sensors, it'll sometimes ignore some temperature sensors, and it'll kind of go to protect itself. By default, the engine will inject more fuel, because when you have a gas vehicle, when it injects more fuel, it actually runs cooler. I know it sounds backwards, but it's called a rich condition. And so the vehicle it'll go to a rich condition to protect itself, because the computer's saying, hey, look, I have a sensor that's not reliable. I'm going to go to a predetermined set of instructions that were programmed at the factory to protect the engine. So when it goes to that, even if these sensors are saying, hey, there's too much fuel, the engine ignores it. So any reason your check engine light is on, you could have a loose gas cap and it'll turn your light on and you'll still get poor fuel economy as if, this sensor failed. It doesn't matter. As soon as the light comes on, your engine starts being less efficient. So if you have a check engine light on or a service engine soon light, it's always a good idea to figure out exactly why that's on, because that plays a huge part in how efficiently your engine will run. Now, next thing you want to kind of take into account is the fuel filter. Now, yeah, the fuel filter doesn't play as big of a deal as some of the other parts, but if you have a plugged up fuel filter, the engine might not be getting the proper fuel pressure it needs to work efficiently. Now, if you've ever been spray painting something or using a can of aerosol or hairspray or something, and when you start getting to the bottom of the
spray can, it starts kind of spraying all weird and not coming out as efficiently. And the same will happen if you have low fuel pressure, or plugged injectors for that matter. Instead of making a fine mist, which can burn easily, you might dribble or have some drops come out, or something like that, and it just runs like your engine will run a lot less efficiently. So getting your fuel filter done is kind of a no-brainer. I do them every 30,000 miles on my vehicles. Some vehicles don't have one, or some vehicles will have it part of the assembly that's in the fuel tank that has the fuel pump. So fuel filter is another thing to definitely take into account. And another thing to check is your brakes. If your brakes are adjusted improperly, then they can drag. Now, most vehicles, this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle, so the brake, when you put the emergency brake on, it locks the rear tires. Now, on a front-wheel drive vehicle, it usually still locks the rear tires, but sometimes it'll lock the front too. Well, if your brakes are adjusted improperly as you're driving down the road, your brakes are still grabbing, trying to stop your vehicle a little bit. So your vehicle has to work that much harder to overcome that amount of friction and just to move itself down the road. So brake maintenance, properly inflated tires, clean filters, good sensors, make sure your check engine light's off, make sure your air filter is good, and all the other stuff that I mentioned in this video. And it plays a huge part. If you have a vehicle that has a couple of those things going on, you can see your fuel mileage tank. So just go over the stuff in this video. Now there's other things like taking extra weight out of your car, or some of the newer vehicles will have underbelly pans that protect the underside of your engine from things popping up or road debris. But if one of those is hanging down like this, it acts like a scoop, and the air will hit it and it'll create resistance. So if you have a newer vehicle, take a look under and make sure that you don't have anything hanging down, or any little thing like that will be detrimental to your fuel mileage. So I don't know how long the high fuel prices are going to last. I don't know what's going to be done to fix it, but I do know that the stuff that I recommended can have a huge impact on your vehicle's fuel economy. So definitely take a look, see where your vehicle stands, look into stuff that I mentioned. Some of it's super easy, some of it you need to take it to the dealer or a mechanic, but all of it can add up in fuel savings for you. So if you like the videos, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate the support. Yeah, just wanted to say thanks, guys, and hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a good one.